Hello and welcome. Tensions over Taiwan are spiking the world over with a recent visit by the US House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And in this episode of Endeavour Explains, we will explain you its core issue and the history behind these tensions. Taiwan, officially known as the Republic of China, is an island separated from China by the Taiwan Strait. It has been governed independently of mainland China, officially the People's Republic of China, or the PRC, since 1949. The PRC views the island as a renegade province and vows to eventually unify Taiwan with the mainland. In Taiwan, which has its own democratically elected government and is home to 23 million people, political leaders have differing views on the island's status and the relations with the mainland. Cross-strait tensions have escalated since the election of Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen in 2016. Tsai has refused to accept a formula that her predecessor Ma Ying-jeou endorsed to allow for increased cross-strait ties. Meanwhile, Beijing has taken increasingly aggressive actions, including by flying fighter jets near the island. Some analysts fear a Chinese attack on Taiwan has the potential to draw the United States into a war with China. At the heart of the divide is that the Chinese government sees Taiwan as a breakaway province that will eventually be a part of the country. Many Taiwanese people consider their self-ruled island to be distinct, whether or not independence is ever officially declared. The first known settlers in Taiwan were Austronesian tribal people who are thought to have come from modern-day southern China. The island seems to have first appeared in Chinese records in AD 239 when an emperor sent an expeditionary force to explore the area, a fact Beijing uses to back its territorial claim. After a relatively brief spell as a Dutch colony, Taiwan was administered by China's Qing dynasty from 1683 to 1895. From the 17th century, significant members of the migrants started arriving from China, often fleeing turmoil of hardship. Most were Hoklo Chinese from Fujia province or Hakka Chinese largely from Guangdong. Their descendants are now by far the largest demographic groups on the island. In 1895, Japan won the First Sino-Japanese War and the Qing government had to cede Taiwan to Japan. After World War II, Japan surrendered and relinquished control of the territory it had taken from China. The Republic of China, one of the victors in the war, began ruling Taiwan with the consent of its allies, the US and UK. But in the next few years, a civil war broke out in China and the then leader Chiang Kai-shek's troops were defeated by Mao Zedong's Communist Army. Chiang, the remnants of his Kuomintang government and the supporters, about 1.5 million people, fled to Taiwan in 1949. This group, referred to as mainland Chinese, dominated Taiwan's politics for many years, though they only account for 14% of the population. Chiang established a government in exile in Taiwan which he led for the next 25 years. Chiang's son, Chiang Ching-kuo, allowed more democratization after coming to power. He faced resistance from local people resentful of authoritarian rule and was under pressure from a growing democracy movement. President Lee Teng-hui, known as Taiwan's father of democracy, led constitutional changes towards which eventually made way for the election of the island's first non-KMT president, Chen Shui-bian, in the year 2000. Beijing claims that Taiwan is bound by an understanding known as the 1992 Consensus, which was reached between the representatives of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, and the Kuomintang Party that then ruled Taiwan. However, the two sides don't agree on the content of the so-called consensus, and it was never intended to address the question of Taiwan's legal status. For the PRC, as the Chinese President Xi Jinping has stated, the 1992 consensus reflects an agreement that the two sides of the strait belong to one China and would work together to seek national reunification. For the KMT, it means one China, different interpretations, with the ROC standing as the one China. Taiwan's KMT drafted constitution continues to recognize China, Mongolia, Taiwan, Tibet, and the South China Sea as part of the ROC. The KMT does not support Taiwan's independence and has consistently called for closer ties with Beijing. But in the face of recent election losses, KMT leaders have discussed whether to change the party's stance on the 1992 consensus. The KMT's chief rival party, the Democratic Progressive Party (DPP), has never endorsed the understanding laid out in the 1992 consensus. President Tsai, who is also the leader of the DPP, has refused to explicitly accept the consensus. Instead, she has attempted to find another formulation that would be acceptable to Beijing. In her 2016 inaugural address, Tsai noted that she was elected president in accordance with the Constitution of the Republic of China, which is a One China document, and said she would safeguard the sovereignty and territory of the Republic of China. Tsai also pledged that she would conduct cross-strait affairs in accordance with the Republic of China's Constitution, Act governing relations between the people of the Taiwan area and the mainland area, and other relevant legislation. Beijing, however, rejected this formulation and cut off official contacts with Taiwan. In her 2019 speech, she reiterated China's long-standing proposal for Taiwan that it be incorporated into the mainland under the formula of one country, two systems. This is the same formula used for Hong Kong, which was guaranteed the ability to preserve its political and economic systems and granted a high degree of autonomy. Such a framework is deeply unpopular among the Taiwanese people. Pointing to Beijing's recent crackdown on Hong Kong's freedom, Tsai and even the KMT have rejected the one country, two systems framework. Relations between Taiwan and China started improving in 1980s as Taiwan relaxed rules on visits to and investments in China. In 1991, Taiwan proclaimed that the war with the People's Republic of China was over. Then in 2000, Taiwan elected Chen Shui-bian as president, much to Beijing's alarm. Mr. Chen and his party, the Democratic Progressive Party, had openly backed independence. A year after Mr. Chen was re-elected in 2004, China passed a so-called anti-secession law, stating China's right to use non-peaceful means against Taiwan if it tried to secede from China. Mr. Chen was succeeded by the KMT's Ma Ying-jeou in 2008, who tried improving relations through economic agreements. 8 years later, in 2016, Taiwan's current president Tsai Ing-wen, who now leads the independence-leaning DPP, was elected. The rhetoric sharpened further in 2018 as Beijing stepped up pressure on international companies if they failed to list Taiwan as a part of China on their websites. It threatened to block them from doing business in China. Ms. Tsai won a second term in 2020 with a record-breaking 8.2 million votes in what was widely seen as a snub to Beijing. By then, Hong Kong had seen months of unrest with huge protesters against the mainland's growing influence, and many in Taiwan were watching closely. While political progress has been slow, links between Beijing and Taipei and the two economies have grown. Between 1991 and the end of May 2021, Taiwanese investment in China totaled $193.5 billion, Taiwanese official figures show. Some Taiwanese people worry their economy is now dependent on China. Others believe that the closer business ties make Chinese military actions less likely because of the cost to China's own economy. A controversial trade agreement sparked the Sunflower Movement in 2014, where students and activists occupied Taiwan's parliament protesting against what they called China's growing influence over Taiwan. Officially, the ruling DPP still favors formal independence for Taiwan, while the KMT favors eventual reunification with China. But most Taiwanese people seem to fall somewhere in between. A June 2022 survey found that only 5.2% of the Taiwanese supported independence as soon as possible, while 1.3% were in favor of unification with the mainland China at the earliest possibility. The rest supported some form of maintaining the status quo, with the largest group wanting to maintain it indefinitely with no move towards either independence or unification. China rejects Taiwan's participation as a member in UN agencies and other international organizations that limit membership to states. Taipei regularly protests its exclusion. The United States also pushes for Taiwan's meaningful participation in such organizations. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Taipei criticized the World Health Organization for giving in to Beijing's demands and continuing to bar Taiwan, which mounted one of the world's most effective responses to COVID-19 in the first 2 years of the pandemic, from attending the organization's World Health Assembly as an observer. Ministers from the group of 7 countries have called for Taiwan's inclusion in WHO forums. Taiwan does, however, hold member status in more than 40 organizations, most of them regional, such as the Asian Development Bank and the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, as well as the World Trade Organization. It holds observer or the other status on several other bodies. Only 14 states maintain official diplomatic ties with Taiwan. No government has ever simultaneously maintained formal diplomatic ties with both China and Taiwan. Despite having all the characteristics of an independent state and a political system that is distinct from China, Taiwan's legal status does remain unclear. The US approach is governed by its One China policy. It is based on several documents such as the 3 US-China communiques reached in 1972, 1978 and 1982, the Taiwan Relations Act passed by the US Congress in 1979, and the recently declassified 6 assurances which President Ronald Reagan conveyed to Taiwan in 1982. These documents lay out that the United States acknowledges the Chinese position that there is but one China and Taiwan is a part of China, and that the PRC is the sole legal government of China. Some US officials have emphasized that the use of the word acknowledge implies that the United States doesn't necessarily accept the Chinese position, rejects any use of force to settle the dispute, maintains cultural, commercial and other ties with Taiwan carried out through the American Institute in Taiwan, commits to selling arms to Taiwan for self-defense, and will maintain the ability to come to Taiwan's defense while not actually committing to doing so, a policy known as strategic ambiguity. The United States' chief goal is to maintain peace and stability in Taiwan Strait, and it has implored both Beijing and Taipei to maintain the status quo. It says it does not support Taiwanese independence. Through its policy of strategic ambiguity, the United States has for decades attempted to maintain a delicate balance between supporting Taiwan and preventing a war with China. But President Joe Biden has seemingly rejected the policy, stating several times that the United States would come to Taiwan's defense if China attacked. White House officials have walked back his comments, saying the policy has not changed, but ultimately the president gets to decide how to respond. Taiwan has received bipartisan support in Congress over the years, with lawmakers proposing and passing legislation to boost US-Taiwan relations, bolster the island's defenses, and encourage its participation in international organizations. The latest proposed legislation, the Taiwan Policy Act of 2022, includes designating Taiwan as a major non-North Atlantic Treaty Organization or a NATO ally. In August 2022, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taipei, the first speaker to do so since Newt Gingrich in 1997, and met with Tai. Beijing strongly condemned the visit and in response planned military exercises that effectively surround the island and banned imports of some of the fruit and fish from Taiwan, among other actions. Taiwan's economy remains reliant on trade with China, which is the island's largest trading partner. However, the economic relationship has experienced disruptions in recent years, partly due to Beijing's pressure on the island and Taiwanese officials' growing concern about its over-reliance on trade with China. And President Ma, who was in office from 2008 to 2016, Taiwan signed more than 20 pacts with the PRC, including the 2010 Cross-Strait Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement, in which they agreed to lift barriers to trade. China and Taiwan resumed direct sea, air and mail links that had been banned for decades. They also agreed to allow banks, insurers and other financial service providers to work in both markets. Tai and the DPP, on the other hand, have attempted to diversify Taiwan's trade relationships with mixed results. Tai has had some success boosting trade with an investment in countries in Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific through a signature initiative, the New Southbound Policy. Trade between Taiwan and the 18 targeted countries increased by more than $50 billion between 2016, when the initiative was unveiled, and 2021. Taiwanese investment in those countries has also steadily increased. In 2019, Tai unveiled a 3-year plan to incentivize Taiwanese manufacturers to move from the mainland back to Taiwan. Still, in 2021, Taiwan's exports to China hit an all-time high. Beijing has pressured countries not to sign free trade agreements with Taiwan. A handful of countries have signed free trade pacts with the island. New Zealand and Singapore are the only developed economies to sign such agreements. Beijing has also pushed for Taiwan's exclusion from the multilateral trading blocs, including the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Taiwan also is not a part of the Biden administration's Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Taiwan is also the world's top contract manufacturer of semiconductor chips, and its industry is booming despite cross-strait tensions. These chips are found in most electronics, including smartphones, computers, vehicles, and even weapons systems that rely on artificial intelligence. Companies in Taiwan were responsible for more than 60% of the revenue generated by the world's semiconductor contract manufacturers in 2020. Much of that can be attributed to Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the world's largest contract chip maker and the top supplier for Apple and other US companies. It is one of the only two companies in the world, the other is South Korea-based Samsung, that has the technological know-how to make the smallest, most advanced chips, and it manufactures more than 90% of them. Some experts argue that United States' dependence on Taiwanese chip firms heightens its motivation to defend Taiwan from a Chinese attack. Recognizing the extent to which the United States relies on one company for critical chips, Biden has pushed to strengthen the US chip industry in 2022. Congress passed a sweeping $280 billion bill to do so. China also relies on Taiwanese chips, though not as much as the United States does. Beijing is working to boost its industry, especially as Washington has pushed TSMC to stop selling to Chinese companies, including Huawei, a Chinese telecommunications giant that Washington claims Beijing could use for espionage. A top concern amongst US analysts is that China's growing military capabilities and assertiveness, as well as the deterioration in cross-strait relations, could spark a conflict. Such a conflict has the potential to lead to a US-China confrontation. That's because China hasn't ruled out using force to achieve Taiwan's reunification, and the United States hasn't ruled out defending Taiwan if China attacks. The US Department of Defense said in a 2021 report that China's military, the People's Liberation Army, is likely preparing for a contingency to unify Taiwan with the PRC by force, while simultaneously deterring, delaying, or denying any third-party intervention such as the United States. However, experts disagree about the likelihood and timing of a Chinese invasion. The top US military commander in the Indo-Pacific warned in 2021 that China could try to invade Taiwan within the next decade, while some experts believe that such an invasion is further off. Others believe 2049 is a critical date. Xi has emphasized that unification with Taiwan is essential to achieving what he calls the Chinese dream, which sees China's great power status restored by 2049. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in early 2022 reignited the debate, with some analysts arguing that Moscow's move could embolden Beijing to similarly invade Taiwan, and others saying that Beijing could become more cautious after witnessing Russia's challenges. Taiwan likely doesn't have the capabilities to defend against a Chinese attack without external support, analysts say. Even though the I and DPP have prioritized increasing defense spending with a record budget of nearly $17 billion for 2022, China's spending is still estimated to be around 22 times of Taiwan's. In 2022, Taiwanese lawmakers approved the Thai government's plan to spend an extra $8.6 billion on defense over the next 5 years. Part of this expanded military budget will go forward towards acquiring cruise missiles, naval mines, and advanced surveillance systems to defend Taiwan's coast. We sincerely hope the world does not witness another war and peace prevails.